Former President Trump returned to Georgia Saturday to campaign on behalf of several Republican candidates running in statewide races next year. The former president has publicly endorsed challengers to Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, but he's also coming out against the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. As the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports, at Saturday's rally, the former president pushed a campaign to, quote, refashion the state's GOP in his mold. He also promoted falsehoods that Georgia's election was tainted by widespread fraud. He lost the state by more than 12,000 votes. AJC's political reporter Greg Bluestein joins me now with more on his reporting. He's also the author of the forthcoming book, Flipped: How Georgia Turned Purple and Broke the Monopoly on Republican Power. Greg, great to have you back on the show. You write that former President Trump is deepening an internal rift among Republicans that actually helped Democrats in the last election cycle. Explain that for us.
Yeah, tens of thousands of Republican voters who voted in November for President Trump stayed home in the runoffs. And this is the fear of senior Republicans here, that whenever Donald Trump comes to Georgia and talks about false claims of a rigged election, about voter fraud, and escalates his internal feud with other Republican leaders he deems not loyal enough because they refused his calls to overturn the election results, it will only depress turnout more. And he reached a new level. Not only did he berate Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and insult Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, he reserved his harshest criticism for Governor Brian Kemp, even saying that Democrat Stacey Abrams would have made a better governor than the Republican he endorsed in 2018.
It's incredible to hear him say that, and as we're talking about the widespread voter fraud claims, I want to talk about Friday's Republican-led so-called audit of ballots in Arizona's Maricopa County, which actually confirmed that President Biden won there in 2020. In fact, organizers admitted that their review actually increased the Biden campaign's margin of victory over the Trump campaign. Here's how former President Trump described media coverage of that audit.
Ever notice when they write about that, they would say, while the election results are a big lie, every reporter, it's just total misinformation. While they're totally unfounded, everything's unfounded, big lie, not correct. While Trump has no reason to say this, I mean, we get piles and piles of information, affidavits by the thousands and thousands. It's a disgrace. We won on the Arizona forensic audit yesterday at a level that you wouldn't believe.
Greg, how did Mr. Trump try to spin the findings of that audit at Saturday's rally? And were the people in the audience buying what he was selling?
I think they were buying what he was selling. They were cheering at every line he gave, at every attack line, every applause line. But he's trying to spin it as a victory. You know, they're trying to ignore the fact that this review actually improved Joe Biden's margin of victory in Arizona's largest county. And it's really part of a strategy of flat-out lies to undermine confidence in the election system and threaten any Republican who doesn't go along with it. And we saw that last night with the former president going after Georgia Republicans and Arizona Republicans who have dared to defy his calls to reverse the election results.
I want to ask you more about that, but first, just let's clarify for our audience that President Trump and his followers are still calling for audits of the 2020 election results in Georgia. Greg, is there any doubt about who won the presidential election there?
There is no doubt about who won the presidential election in Georgia. Multiple recounts, multiple investigations in some of Georgia's largest counties, and a statewide, two different statewide recounts all showed that Joe Biden narrowly won the state of Georgia. Judges have laughed complaints out of court. Bipartisan election officials, including the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia, have all said the election was fair and there's no evidence of rampant fraud. And that's what makes these calls so infuriating to state leaders, right? To people who are not pro-Trump supporters, but people who want the election to be carried out in a free and fair fashion and want confidence in the system. Because right now, when you have a significant segment of Georgia's population, and really probably the Republican electorate, doubting that these elections were free and fair because of the former president's lies about it, it only increases the uncertainty and really causes problems down the road for Republicans who are looking to maintain their grip on statewide offices here in Georgia in 2022.
Let's talk about the most specific example of that, the former president supporting a challenge to the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who, as our viewers will remember, publicly refused to follow Mr. Trump's lead in perpetrating the big lie of widespread voter fraud. What are the implications of this, and how is Raffensperger perceived there in Georgia?
Yeah, this is going to be a real tough re-election battle for Brad Raffensperger because he's being vilified by the right, by the Republicans on the right, by the pro-Trump crowd, as someone who didn't stand up for what they say is voter integrity. And on the left, from Stacey Abrams and her allies say that, they're being unfairly portrayed by Brad Raffensperger as trying to twist election laws in their favor. He is facing a real tough battle because the former president has endorsed Congressman Jody Hice, who is a Trump loyalist, who voted to block Joe Biden's electoral college certification. And he's got few safe harbors to go in Georgia politics. If there's one unifying enemy last night, it wasn't even Stacey Abrams at this rally. I mean, as I said, even former President Trump said he would rather have Stacey Abrams in the governor's office than Brian Kemp. If there's one unifying enemy for Republicans last night, it was Brad Raffensperger. Every time his name was uttered, there seemed to be boos from the crowd.
How else are we seeing the former president and his allies try to lay the groundwork to dispute any potential election losses in the 2022 midterms, or even with an eye potentially for 2024? Because whoever wins that Secretary of State position, whether it's Raffensperger or somebody else, potentially has a very important role to play.
Yeah, and you heard not just from Jody Hice, who is Trump's favored candidate for Secretary of State, but you also heard other down-ticket officials say that if they were in office, there wouldn't have been these sorts of debates about President Trump. They would have done everything they could to clear the way for what they call investigations into voter fraud. Look, they're laying the groundwork. First, they're looking back, though. I mean, if there was another dominant call last night at the rally, it was for an audit of the 2020 election in Georgia, something that really is impossible. The books are already closed. The election has been certified. It's been verified multiple times through recounts, through investigations, yet still there's this rallying call for audits. Multiple times throughout the rally, the crowd broke into chants of audit, audit, audit. The state Georgia GOP chairman led the crowd at one point in those chants. You had Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene call for an audit, and other down-ticket candidates call for these audits. There's no real process for such an audit, and the books are already closed, but it's another indication that these candidates are looking more backwards than forwards. But at the same time, Georgia does have a new election rewrite law in place that will have have a sweeping impact on 2022 elections. And one of the impacts is that it allows Republican-controlled legislature more oversight, more control over local elections boards. And that's the issue that's coming into play right now in Georgia.
A very important point. Greg Bluestein, thank you.
Thank you.